Go grab your guns. I'll tell you one time. This ain't philosophy. Why?
Well, that's always shocking to me, actually. My throat gurgles blood every time I hear that. I don't know how Jimmy does it. Anyway, good evening. Hello. Welcome to the War Room. If you are new here, I doubt it, but this is day 296. We're fastly approaching a year as we reach the year's end. And what have we learned so far in that year? I think domestically we've learned that we're being led by idiots who are slowly bankrupting the country and making it harder for everyday people like us to do what we do daily. Egg prices, diesel prices, I guess for some of you gasoline prices, stuff like that. We've also learned that despite the fact that American Idol can tabulate, collate, and show you the results of 70 million votes in 2 minutes and 2 seconds, but states in this country are too stupid to even get that right in 2.5 to 3 weeks, just goes to show that they don't want to fix it because they like to maneuver in the gray areas of the stupidity of the rules of all these different elections. Abroad, we've learned that you can't join the boys club unless they want to let you into the boys club, and they're willing to sacrifice most of the people of your country to prove that point. And that Russians are assholes. At least the ones in power. So anyway, today's show is going to be slightly different because I'm trying different ways to keep the show relevant without just me reading the news. Now, I'm still going to read you the news, but there's going to be a different order to how I do it because the theme of today's show, which I've been doing the theme lately, is what if? And I was going to actually get into, personals in the week or whatever, but I guess I told you guys last week that my truck broke down. I've only had it 9 weeks. And I contacted the dealer today, and they finally got around to taking a look at it, but they don't know what's wrong with it yet, so I won't know till Monday, which means I might not get my truck back by Christmas. Lame. Anyway, the theme of today's show is what if, and I aim to answer 4 questions only tonight, or ask 4 questions, and possibly read you the stories that will help you draw conclusive answers to these questions. The first one, I was very certain I knew the answer to this until about 2 minutes before we went on air, because the mic strike managed to find a story that changed my answer completely, which you will find out here shortly. But the first question we're going to ask is, What if Russia ran out of missiles and was forced into a land-based war only? If you look at the scroller below, you'll probably notice that there haven't been a lot of changes when it comes to aircraft, tanks, armored personnel carriers, special towing equipment, things that move broken vehicles around. You probably notice that those sections of my scroller really haven't changed much. But the ones that have changed in pretty good chunks throughout the weeks have been UAVs and cruise missiles. Those have been dramatically elevated for the last couple of weeks. What happens when they run out of those? Why would I even ask that? I have stories to support my question. Because they're running out. Second question we're going to answer tonight is, what if NATO stood up to Russia's attacks on the civilian population, especially maternity hospitals, as crimes against humanity, since infants aren't military combatants? What if NATO found a way, or an excuse, or a reason to interject without Article 5 simply based on the grounds of genocide and crimes against humanity? I have a question. I have a story or two to ask that question. Third question tonight will be, what if Putin actually had to face the music at his annual press conference and had to answer tough questions? And that's going to be the shortest segment, obviously, because we all know the answer to that. And the last question I have tonight is, and this one's really kind of controversial, what if Ukraine manages to get Paul Whelan, the retired Marine that has been locked up abroad, way longer than Brittany Griner was? What if Ukraine was able to get him released from Russian custody? What would the fallout of that be? And the look, what would that look like on a geopolitical scale for all the United States' efforts in light of a Ukrainian prisoner exchange that gets back Americans? Like, how bad would we look if that happens? So these are the questions we're going to answer tonight. I have several stories that support these questions, and before I get into them, let me go ahead and bring in my panelists. So, first and foremost, you've already know most of these guys. I'm going to bring in Mikhail Nightstrike, also known as Nightstrike, who is apparently Bob Vila right now, tearing apart his house or rebuilding it, which is what I'm going to do in the spring. Next,
I did show you what I did to the back stairs on my house, right?
I don't think you posted the pictures, but show me after the show.
Yeah, because basically all the wood rotted, so I had to replace most of the wood except the poles. The posts.
That is every single baseboard in my kitchen, thanks to the dogs.
Yeah.
Next is Scott P79, who happens to be
Tank.
working tonight on call, if they call him, in a blizzard in the... No, you're good?
Now snow's basically over.
Oh, now it's all just rain and slush.
It's become...
No, it's swapped over from snow to freezing rain.
Yeah.
So
which means I am not leaving the house.
You're not going to turn that thing into like a four-wheel drive snowmobile?
Hell no.
Okay. And last but not least, we have the Warsaw Patriot, who surprisingly made it tonight because he tends to work himself to death and then he has to go to bed early. So, good evening to all of you. Good evening to all the people out there on the YouTube side. I can see Terry, Shady Hill, Bjorn, the finest of apes, and Gunmetal Guy, who says he's listening in the background while he's at work, which is what I do for most of everyone else's shows while I'm at work. So, thank you all for that. Let's go ahead and get into the meat and potatoes, because I'd like to get through this relatively quickly, and because I've got a lot of stuff to do still the entire weekend, even though I don't have my truck, so there's that. But anyway.
Whose fault is that?
What kind of truck is it?
It is currently. I don't know who does the electronics. I'm gonna blame Mercedes for it because they're the ones who originally designed that part, but then FCA took over and they didn't do anything with it. So, anyway, okay, let's go ahead and let's go ahead and start into the stories of the first question I have to ask. So it was, what if Russia ran out of missiles? What if they were forced into a land-based war only? Um,
Why don't you go through yours first? And then
I'm
why
going
don't you
to.
do
I'm
mine?
going to. And I got this in chronological order, so it's not like I'm not going to be reading it to you like I did before, where it's like, okay, this is day 291, 292. We're not going to do that. So, because I have to go back and forth on the dates to answer the questions. So, you're going to get the answers to this question, or at least the stories to this question, in chronological order. But then when we get to the next question, we're going to bounce back and forth in time again. So, just be prepared for that. In all honesty, I'm not even going to bother reading the dates because it doesn't really matter. Everything fell between last Friday and today. So, knowing that, we're going to present these questions, or at least stories to help answer these questions. Fair enough? Let's get started. So, first story I have that helps work with this is Russia is looking to obtain hundreds of ballistic missiles from Iran as Tehran becomes one of Moscow's top military backers. This came from UK defense officials last Saturday. Iran faced international ire earlier this year when the White House announced that it acknowledged Tehran would be gifting, all in quotes, Russia hundreds of drones as Moscow's supplies showed signs of dwindling less than 6 months into its war with Ukraine. Gifting Russia, we know that's bullshit because the only thing that Russia could pay a country whose economy is based off of oil exports is either already made nuclear weapons or sending technical advisors to teach them how to make nuclear weapons. Let's not fucking kid ourselves. That's the gift, and the gift that keeps on giving is Russia's going to keep sending eggheads to do it.
You know, never mind the fact that Iran's got its own problems with people protesting too.
Well, yeah, but that never gets any traction.
Uh,
Every
No,
year I
'cause they
see the
shoot
same.
them.
Well, every year I see the stories about that. Every year I cross my fingers and go, "Oh God, let the youth of Iran destroy what is holding them down." And even if you have to bring back the nation of Persia to get rid of the stigma of Iran, then so be it, because you're supposed to be the future of the country, not these decrepit religious zealot old farts. And yet,
honestly, most people would rather see Persia come back than
of
Iran.
course, because they're
Even
not
the rest of the
assholes.
world.
They're not
Oh,
religious zealot assholes.
Yeah, Persia was agreeable. Persia, you could actually sit down and have a civilized conversation with them. The
Yeah,
Iranians, no, not really.
exactly. So it's like every time that happens, I hope for it, and then the royal guard and the police and the Shah and whoever else just smashes it down, and then the poor youth get crushed with more sanctions. And it's like, we can't go in there and help them do that. They got to do the things
unless
on their own.
unless Iran goes full North Korea, eventually the government will be overthrown.
Hopefully.
It's only a matter of time.
Hopefully. I mean, most of us have been crossing our fingers and hoping for that for what, 30 years?
Yeah.
John Z has arrived. Good evening to you, sir. So anyway, but Tehran has since taken even bolder steps, sending other missile units and agreeing last month to streamline Russia's availability to develop Iranian drones on its own turf for use in Ukraine. Iran's support to the Russian military is likely to grow in the coming months. Russia is attempting to obtain more weapons, including hundreds of ballistic missiles. You're backfeeding. The UK Defense Ministry stated in an intelligence update Saturday. In return, Russia is highly likely offering Iran an unprecedented level of military and technical support that is transforming their defense relationship. Like I was saying before, they're going to be sending nuke techs. Let's not kid ourselves. The assessment echoed comments made by the White House National Security Council spokesman John Kirby, former Navy admiral, last Friday, who said that U.S. intelligence suggested Moscow is offering Tehran an unprecedented level of military and technical support that is transforming their relationship into a full-fledged defense partnership. UK defense officials said Saturday that it is highly likely that Russia has used up a substantial portion of its SS-26 Iskander short-range ballistic missiles, which can carry a warhead weighing up to 1,000 pounds with a range of over 300 miles, since its invasion of Ukraine began more than 9 months ago. If Russia succeeds in bringing in a large number of Iranian ballistic missiles into service, it will likely use them to continue and expand its campaign of strikes against Ukraine's critical national infrastructure. Kirby highlighted that Russia has also been training Iranian pilots on the Sukhoi Su-35 fighter jets, and said Tehran could start receiving the aircraft within a year. What happened to gifting? This is what they're giving back, clearly. The NSC spokesman pledged that the U.S. and its allies would use what tools it can to, quote, expose and disrupt these activities. So we're going to be sabotaging their production? And we're prepared to do more, he added. Oh, okay. So sabotage, espionage, bribery. Is it going to be another $150 billion in mixed currency on pallets in the middle of the night? When did we hear that happen? Oh, that's right, just before Barack Obama left office. Moving on. Next story. Oh, I forgot to show you the pictures. Oops.
Oops.
Sorry, I made a mistake. That was the picture that was supposed to be for that story. My mistake. Moving on. Next story. This picture. Russian arms supplies have dwindled to the point that it will, quote, struggle to replenish its reserves, even with the support from nations like Iran and North Korea, a senior military official confirmed late Monday. Moscow's war in Ukraine has dragged on for more than 9 months, far longer than Russian President Vladimir Putin ever had predicted. This is what defense officials have long assessed. Russia's inability to successfully push its forces forward and recent losses on the front lines has prompted the Kremlin to continue its assault by heavily relying on shelling and aerial assaults. The constant barrage of missile fire is an attempt to dampen the morale of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians alike and force Kyiv to make concessions, a strategy that is not only yet to succeed, but is proving too costly for Moscow to continue. We assess that at the rate of fire that Russia has been using its artillery and rocket ammunition, in terms of what we would call fully serviceable artillery and rocket ammunition, they could probably do that until maybe January or February of 2023. This came from a senior official that kind of just analyzes this stuff based off of hardware movements and then like communications for, military equipment orders, and then just watching the sheer number of launches and strikes. So they figured, you got about enough left until February, which would make it about the 1-year mark. The official said that Western intelligence had assessed Russia's fully serviceable ammunitions that are rapidly dwindling, and it's likely forcing them to increasingly rely on arms with degraded conditions. Factory seconds? The degraded ammunitions is in reference to dated projectiles that in some instances are more than 40 years old and are not guaranteed to detonate or explode upon impact, let alone even leave the launching pad. This essentially puts Russian forces in a position to have to make a choice about what risks it's willing to accept in terms of increased failure rates, unpredictable performance, and whether or not these degraded munitions would require any type of refurbishment, which of course requires a certain amount of expertise and time. It would also require them to have a crew that was old enough that designed them and maintained them 40 years ago. Space Cowboys, anybody? Yeah, remember that? Given the current state of Russia's munition stockpile, it's not surprising that they continue to look at opportunities to work with countries like Iran and with North Korea to try to gain additional capability. Though Russia has used Iranian drones to hit Ukraine, the amount of arms it is expected to continue to receive from its partners will likely not be enough to backfill its stocks. Backfill. We used to talk about that a lot in Europe at the beginning of this show, 9 months ago. Even with steps Tehran, Iran, and Moscow are taking to streamline drone production within Russian borders, because now they're building them under license and contract. The Russian military will very likely, struggle to replenish its reserve of fully serviceable military artillery and rocket ammunition through foreign suppliers, increased domestic production, and refurbishment. So, they ran out of the good stuff. They started relying on the cheap stuff. And now they're pulling out the surplus. Now, just as a small sidebar here, most of us are gun owners. Most of us may even have interest in milsurps. Most of us may have even got off our ass and purchased military surplus ammunition. And I'm reaching over my desk right now, and I'm going to grab this box that's sitting right next to me. And inside is 20 rounds of 7.9 Mauser ammunition, dated 1940. And I can tell you that I've had 10 boxes of this shit. And I can tell you that out of the 20 rounds in these 10 boxes, I'm lucky if 3 go off. That's what Russia's doing with missiles. Imagine if you're that poor Slav conscripted fuck having to push the button next to a missile that may or may not launch, that may or may not track properly, or might even detonate on the pad right in front of you. In your face.
Yep.
In your rotten, turnip-eating, rotten-toothed, Slav, barley-eating, conscripted shitlord. Well, maybe that solves our problem for us. I don't know. All I'm saying is they're down to the third-string garbage. That runs
if we're
on
lucky,
garbage.
well, if the Ukrainians are lucky, the conscripted Slavs that don't want to be there will continue to keep
leaving.
Well, not only leaving, but sabotaging their equipment.
That is a possibility, yes. So, after those two stories have gone, hey, don't put down turnips. Thank you, John. I'll have you know Koreans make kimchi out of turnips, and some of them are quite good. I have a jar in my fridge right meow. Anyway, so after those two Russia stories, I thought, in response to Russia's continued and increased use of missile and drone attacks, well, we responded, the U.S., with this. How phallic. Big, bright red phallic symbol rocketing off into, well, shut your mouth. Anyway, the U.S. plans to send Ukraine the Patriot missile defense, U.S. plans to send Ukraine the Patriot missile defense system are underway, which was confirmed Tuesday.
You apparently did not see what I put in War Number Changes, apparently.
Yes, I have. Though, well, this is an older story. Remember, right? This isn't the latest one.
No, even when you posted that.
Yeah, I know. You told me that they're already there.
Uh-huh.
I know that. But this story was dated, actually 2 days ago. Sorry, my mistake. So it's kind of in the middle. Anyway.
I think you should show the picture of the new Russian technical.
No. No, I know exactly what picture you're talking about, though. I think it was hilarious.
Technically, it's technical.
Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin had not formally signed off on the transfer as of 2 days ago. But, as Scott pointed out, they're already in country. The news comes following weeks of speculation that Kyiv may receive the top weaponry after a senior defense official in November said Washington was considering sending Ukraine the system. Pentagon spokesman Brigadier General Pat Ryder said last Tuesday, there were no specific plans to send the system, but noted that the U.S. was not ruling it out. Well, as we know now in hindsight, they sent it. And they were warned by the Russian military or media this morning, don't send them or else. Well, too bad. Too bad. We already sent them.
They've upped the ante, too,
today.
So.
We do maintain a robust dialogue with our Ukraine partners and our allies, with our international partners of Ukraine's security assistance needs to include battlefield capabilities, he told reporters, in light of Russia's cruel and continued heavy bombardment of innocent civilians and civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. We'll continue to have those discussions that look at capabilities that they'll need to defend their territory. Well, it's about time. Ryder said that he had nothing more to add when pressed by local news on what the holdup was when it came to sending the defensive weaponry to Ukraine. He was told by a U.S. official Tuesday that an announcement is expected to come later this week. The announcement was, we already sent them. Patriot missiles, that's the best part, actually.
I think
Patriot
they were just
missiles have been
translating it from English to Ukrainian.
No. This is all on our side of the pond. They were like, we have an announcement to make. And what would that be? Oh, we already sent those. That was the announcement. Patriot missiles has been described as a long-range, all-weather system that can be used in combat engagements against manned and unmanned aircraft, cruise missiles,
Cool.
and tactical ballistic missiles, according to military contractor Raytheon.
Patriot missiles. Haven't we been using those since like the 80s?
My dad helped develop them back in the 70s.
Okay, so 70s then.
Yeah.
Huh.
The decision to send the Patriot missile systems could be viewed as less escalatory by Russia than sending a system like the Army Tactical Missile System, which has a range of roughly 185 miles. We sent those already too, actually. The Patriot missile system has a range of up to 100 miles on paper. Russia on Wednesday apparently responded to reports that the U.S. would be announcing the deployment of the advanced missile system imminently, and claimed that it would become a legitimate target for Russian strikes in Ukraine, according to a Bloomberg reporter. So this is like mixed sources here. Though this warning doesn't appear to change Moscow's operational standing. Russia has increasingly relied on aerial bombardment to hit civilian and military targets alike as its forces stalled on front lines. Western defense officials earlier this month additionally warned that Russia may be looking to Iran to send in hundreds of ballistic missiles as its supplies dwindle. Senior U.S. military officials said this week that it also assessed Russia has exhausted its ammunition stocks to the extent that even foreign arms will not be able to backfill its reserves, which is overlap from the last story. So, I guess one of the little side questions I have with this is...
Oh, hold up.
Huh.
Before you get there,
Yeah.
I do want to mention the Air Force did test a new hypersonic missile.
Yes, and they launched it off of a B-52F? Something like that? It's basically a missile boat.
Yeah.
A missile truck, I think they call them.
But it was so fast, they didn't have a speed for it.
I think it was Mach 4.8. It's either 4.8 or 5.8. It was quick. It made the Kinzhal missile look pedestrian. In a way. Because at least our tracking system is far better than theirs.
Exactly.
So there's that.
But again,
yes, they did test that.
I want to put that footnote there before we get to the big debate.
The big boom. Well, the question I want to know is, are they going to start sending Scuds? Like, are those still a thing?
Yeah.
Because what does Iran have?
They've got tons of Scuds.
That isn't already owned by Russia.
I know Iran also has a lot of Chinese small arms.
That's not a missile.
No, but they also got Chinese missiles.
Well, I don't know.
Okay.
If Chinese...
Fair enough.
Well,
it's just I asked the question. I mean, thank you for the answer. It's just I wasn't sure.
Chinese missiles are probably better than North Korean. I'll give you
No,
that.
I mean, seriously, they actually get a lot of Chinese hardware coming from China.
Of course. I mean, I'm trying not to say this by sounding derogatory, okay? But you can't...
It's China. You can't help being derogatory.
Well, there's a saying, you got to call a spade, right? The fact of the matter is China, Iran, and Russia is your new axis of evil. It is. It just is. North Korea's in there too. They're like the retarded little brother screaming, going, "Hey, wait for me!" But, that's kind of what they do. Because, Kim Jong-un is a fat-cheeked retard, so... But I digress. Moving on, because we're still answering this question, or we're still building up to this question.
We're building the question right now.
So, I have drone strike with a Y.
With a Y.
Yep. And this was from 2 days ago. Russia launched 13 Iranian-made Shahed drones into Kyiv Wednesday. What little they have left, I suppose. In one of their largest attempted strikes of its kind on the Ukrainian capital. All 13 drones were apparently targeting energy infrastructure, but were down before they reached their targets, and no military or civilian casualties were reported. This came from city administrative and defense officials in town. Air raid sirens rang out shortly before 6 a.m. local time, after a barrage of Shahed drones were reportedly fired over a period of 3 hours. This came from Kyiv's regional military administration. Russia was looking to hit the city's energy infrastructure, and in a telegram post, city officials said once again Russia targeted the critical infrastructure of the region and the capital. Denis Gonza is head of the Ukrainian frontline media platform and was quoted as saying that the attack targeted the outskirts of the city in 2 waves as people got ready for work Wednesday morning, though he did not believe the downtown area was directly threatened. Russians were trying to attack the energy infrastructure of Kyiv because this is what they're really trying to achieve, and that's to make a total blackout in the capital and in the whole country, he noted, saying that Russian forces have been targeting all of Ukraine's energy infrastructure, ranging from large power plants just to even small transmitter and transformer facilities. They're trying to make sure that our energy system is non-functional, so that we don't have enough electricity to even continue our existence, he added. At least 2 government buildings and 1 private home were damaged by following drone debris, though the exact extent of the damage is still unclear, according to most officials. U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink, I think I've only shown you her picture like once, ever, responded to the attacks in a tweet and said, "Drones in Kyiv this morning, but I know waking up to Russia's bombs is an all too common experience endured with bravery and dignity across Ukraine every day. Word salad. We're with you, but more support is on its way," she says. Brink did not expand on the nature of the additional support Kyiv can expect. Well, because she's saying it like prayer. You're just promising something and not delivering. Brink did not expand on the nature of it. Tuesday, or let's see, she didn't expand on the nature of the additional support Kyiv can expect Tuesday, and that the Pentagon is looking to send the war-torn country Patriot missile defense systems capable of downing manned and unmanned aircraft, along with cruise and ballistic missiles. Russia's stalled progression on the front lines and recent battlefield losses has prompted it to increasingly rely on targeting Ukraine's energy systems in an attempt to block civilian access to running water, electricity, and heat as the winter months start to really set in. Western officials have accused Moscow of weaponizing winter, and some 70 nations and entities on Tuesday pledged to provide Ukraine with $1 billion in support for its energy system to help Ukraine get through the winter months. Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal said this week that somewhere between 40 and 50% of Ukraine's electrical grid was currently down due to Russian strikes.
With
So,
a
yeah.
Y.
That's what they're with a Y, which is exactly what they're going after. And I believe this is the last of my stories for this question, and then I'll have you add the real pièce de
real one.
résistance. And this is dated today, actually. And I woke up to this story. Like, I literally woke up and this was happening. Explosions were reported in at least 3 Ukrainian cities Friday morning, as authorities said Russia launched a major missile attack on energy facilities. That's one of those transformer buildings right there, or substations. On energy facilities and infrastructure. Local authorities on social media app Telegram said air raid alarms sounded across the country as explosions were reported in the capital of Kyiv, southern Kryvyi Rih, and northeastern Kharkiv. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko reported explosions in at least 4 districts, according to the Associated Press. The attack on the capital continues, Klitschko wrote on social media. He urged residents to seek shelter, reminding them that subway services in the capital were suspended as people flocked to the underground tunnels for protection. Kharkiv Mayor Ihor Terekov said that his city is without electricity, while Kharkiv Regional Governor Ole Snyehubov, got that one right, announced 3 strikes on critical infrastructure. Kirillio Tymoshenko, a top official in President Zelensky's office, reported a strike on a residential building in Kryvyi Rih. There may be people under the rubble, he wrote on Telegram, adding that emergency services had arrived at the building. National railway operator, Ukralzitsnya, reported power outages at an undisclosed number of stations in the eastern and central Kharkiv Kivororad, Donetsk, and Dnipropetrovsk. Dnipropetrovsk. That's a really hard Cyrillic to read. Regions due to damage to the energy infrastructure. Trains remained in operation by switching from electric power to steam engine power. Russian strikes targeting energy infrastructure have been part of a new strategy to try to force Ukrainians into submission after key losses in recent months. In contrast, some analysts and Ukrainian leaders believe Russia's losses have only strengthened Ukrainian forces as the conflict enters its 10th month. Russian strikes have been launched on Ukraine intermittently since mid-October, with previous rounds taking place on December 5th. Ukrainian authorities have reported some successes in intercepting and downing incoming missiles, rockets, and armed drones. So the question remains, what would change with Russia's strategy if they ran out of these missiles and drones? Would their land campaign be forced to push harder? Or would they be forced into a tactical retreat with their tail between their legs because they can't advance? My question, I was like alluding to the answer already by asking this question. Like I was leading you to water. However, Mikhail Naistryksky found a story just before we went on air.
Well, I saw this morning, and
I think the answer is if they run out of missiles, what you show, or what you're about to tell us, is an extreme possibility of standoff. So go ahead and tell us.
Okay, so basically, Russia's taking a page out of the North Korean playbook by grandstanding, and apparently the Russian government released video of a nuclear-capable ICBM being loaded into one of those Scud launchers.
They are arming launchers with nuclear missiles.
Because honestly, my speculation on this is, yes, it's grandstanding, like you said. It's basically taking a page out of the North Korean book. Hey, this is what we've got. We're not afraid to use it. But you have to realize, the minute they fire off even one into Ukraine, there will be 7 others from other nations saying, we're not going to let them go further than this, and them firing at Russia. Because
that's the problem.
And that's the problem with using nuclear weapons in a modern era like this. Okay,
you can't put genie back in the bottle once you pop the cork off.
though. The United States was able to get 2 nuclear weapons off on Japan in World War II and not have any blowback because they were the only people that had such weapons.
Yes, but that was also a complete surprise attack.
Nowadays, everybody's got nuclear weapons. And if it looks like any of the fallout may head to any of those countries that may have nuclear weapons themselves, you know more than a fact that they're going to fire nuclear weapons right back at Russia in retaliation for the fallout going into their country.
Let me ask you this. How many countries all combined have nuclear capabilities right now?
Most of Western Europe.
That is a Googleable answer, sir. There's a very small list of countries that have nuclear weapons.
But it's most of Western Europe.
I'm hearing countries in Western Europe. Here's the thing.
I'm hearing India is now getting them.
India has its own problems right now.
Here's the problem. What you just told us was actually the response. You see, the thing is I brought up the story about the Patriot missile battery system. And then Scott very correctly pointed out that we aren't talking about doing it. We already did it. And Russia this morning responded. See, they said, if you do this, there will be consequences. You have just told us what the consequence was. They have shown us what the consequence was. Now they're saying, you tipped our hand. Now we've got these Roman candles ready to go. You remove Skeletor. That's what they're doing right now.
And you know what the United States will probably do? they'll probably move to the highest DEFCON rating there is.
No,
and
because it doesn't
arm
put
their missiles.
our DEFCON level doesn't go that high when the domestic security is not in threat. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to hit us directly in the continental United States. They're going to hit everything that we're interested in Eastern Europe. So that won't be a DEFCON response. That'll just be that'll be a military response that they will have, but it's not going to put us in that response. Well, we'll be at a heightened level of alert, though. Make no mistake. It's just the DEFCON levels are usually set aside for what happens in your country or against your country at your border or within your borders. Like if we thought that the Belgorod was parked right outside of Washington and they just pop up and put up the periscope and start flashing Morse code of "you're fucked," okay, yeah, they would absolutely raise it because they're like, Jesus Christ, we didn't even know they were 100 feet off the coast. But they're not there yet. Hopefully. Hopefully.
Okay, just for reference,
Sure.
they grandstanded with one. It looked more like a Scud launcher with an ICBM in it. That's what it looked like. Personally,
Well, yeah, that's fine. I mean,
you know, but
nuclear weapons have gotten smaller and more portable. So
right,
the size of it shouldn't discount the danger of it.
and you realize that the United States also has an estimated of like 100 or so nuclear warheads stored across Europe in air bases in Belgium, Germany,
Sure, but
Italy,
if they do,
Netherlands,
they have to be
and Turkey.
they have to be activated, called up, armed, fused, ready to go type of a thing. It's not like they're just gonna raise the ICBM boner on camera in front of them. Like we don't have that ready yet. They did. They had it ready. They showed it off. You had the picture.
Right. And the other thing is France and the United Kingdom both have probably anywhere between 400 and 500 nuclear weapons.
Nah, it seems a bit high. You got to remember, we had that nuclear proliferation deal before. We were trying to make another one with Russia recently, where everyone draws down their inventory. If we drew down our inventory to sub 500, there's no way in hell England and France have even 100.
Well,
They'd probably have less than 25.
Well, I think that tally is probably combined. Like each of them have like 250 or something like that.
I don't even think we have that many.
Oh yes, we do. We've got
not
more.
on paper. Not on paper.
Yes,
Not
on paper.
Russia on paper has the largest current nuclear arsenal. I think it's like over 7,000.
Does that count as?
Now, how
does
many
that
of them
also
work are a different story, but
No,
What-
right now the U.S. has about a little over 5,000, of which probably 3,700 are operational, and the rest of them are supposed to be dismantled. But we're the United States. Are we going to dismantle them? No,
I
we'll probably
would
just put them in.
suggest that they are in several different states of dismantlement, disrepair, just taken apart.
They may just be put in storage, like in case we have to repair them and put them back into service. They're serviceable.
Maybe.
But in their situation right now, they're in a dismantled state, and I say that with air quotes.
Do you have a source on that number, Jefe?
Me?
No. El Jefe is basically, he's saying that France has about 300. Which, that'd be a lot. That would be a lot. But I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, the deterrent is there.
But honestly, it seems like Russia is just blowing a lot of smoke, and nobody's buying it. Honestly, because they may be pushing the nuclear envelope, but again, before they did that, we tested a new hypersonic missile. So, I mean,
let me tell you why I have to respectfully disagree with your assessment. Because what you're suggesting is this is and I might have suggested this slightly before we went on air. This display was sort of a North Korean-esque type of response, right?
And I agree with you.
And yeah, that's why I said it, because you can see the overlap in how it works. So like the mannerism is the same. However, Russia's not a country that bluffs on a whim, right? The thing that Russia has done that North Korea has still not done is well, I won't say successfully, but Russia at least invaded, and Russia is occupying Ukraine right now. They actually put boots on the ground. They actually fired missiles into the country they're attacking. North Korea hasn't done that yet. Their posturing is hollow and weak because they haven't done anything else. They've done the posturing with the missile tests, but they have never once stepped outside of their little hermit country. Whereas Russia has been putting boots to ass since February. Now,
Right, but
with
again,
varying levels of failure and success.
I have to argue this point. I do not believe that Russia would do the scorched earth tactic and kill all of their troops that are remaining in eastern Ukraine, as well as most of the most of the country, just to prove a point.
Let
They're
me
not that
point out.
stupid.
Let me
They're not that
remind you.
stupid.
No, they are. Let me remind you that Joseph Stalin killed 26 million of his own people. A couple 100,000 that are occupying Ukraine is a drop in the bucket to a man who has no value on human life in Russia.
They're expendable in their lives.
And I'm gonna take the high road and tell you, yeah, they all went to Siberia.
Well, we've already heard Putin on record say he's not mad. Like crazy mad, right? He's not mad enough to go and slam the nuclear button and destroy all the land that he wants to take over.
Yet.
However, on the same breath, I will still remind you that his predecessor killed 26 million of his own people. 300,000 in Ukraine doesn't matter to Vladimir Putin. I promise you that.
I would argue that it was one of the previous predecessors, yes, but
they're still using combat tactics from that previous predecessor.
Not him. They're using it. Was it the Khrushchev?
No, they still. Okay, look. Soviet Union doctrine: scorched earth, destroy everything. Here's Katyushas, vomit missile rockets, blah, 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 all over the country, right?
Yes.
What are they doing right now in Ukraine? The Grom system, which is an upgraded Katyusha. It's the same tactic. It's siege warfare. It's the same thing. They're trying to do to the eastern parts of Ukraine what was done to them at Stalingrad. And they can't do it because they've never physically done it themselves. They were the victims of it, and they were like, oh, we need to do that because that worked on us. That's what they're doing. They're trying to imitate a combat strategy that they were a victim of. And they were like, whatever they did to us, we want to do that to somebody else. But they didn't know how the other side did that to them. They just said we were losing.
Weapons have gotten bigger and better.
Yes, but the human condition hasn't changed. The brain hasn't changed. The way that Russians do Russian things still has not changed. Otherwise, Putin wouldn't want to bring it back to the good old USSR. He wants it back that way. So he's going to do everything that they did.
The problem is not all of his people want it that way either.
He kills those people. He disappears those people.
Night Strike, this is
Mongolia.
Night Strike, this is a man that sent out people to the slaughter out to Ukraine and murder millions of Ukrainians in the Bucha incident.
Yes.
And he called them as fucking heroes in his fucking country.
That wasn't
what the fuck?
That was a couple hundred.
But still, the point is, he calls his own fucking soldiers as, heroes when they're fucking slaughtering murderers.
That's how propaganda works.
Thank you, Warsaw, on Propaganda 101.
I get that, though. Your point is made. It's just, that's how propaganda works. He's going to blow smoke up the ass of his soldiers because that's what keeps them proud and that's what keeps them fighting for him.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going
And-
to tell them, I'm about to send you into a meat grinder that you may not come out of. He'll never say that. He's going to say, you're going to denazify a country. Never mind what the West, the internet, and every fucking country aside from me is trying to tell you, okay? My word is God, and they're all liars. Like,
And this-
right now, he is screaming fake news to everybody but himself, to his soldiers. And the soldiers are like, this guy's fucking crazy, but we can't
yes.
defy him because he'll kill us.
But the problem is him letting the Russian government do something like this, like take video of this and throw it out there, might have the reverse effect as far as morale on troops already in Ukraine, because that just tells them, oh hey, your leader has finally decided that if he can't win, he's gonna use nuclear weapons and kill all of you guys out there fighting on the front lines.
Correct. Point very, very well made. You're about to see defections on a level that hasn't happened yet in this conflict.
Yeah.
Because they're going to sit there. I promise you this. Because Zelensky's already done this before.
Because
Zelensky did a commercial.
People's gonna ask Yakov, on the front lines. It's like, hey, are we gonna get nuked by our own people?
Well, no, before even that, Zelensky put out a video to Russian mothers, come claim your children before they're killed. Remember that?
Yep.
He's going to put out another video. Before Russia gets their announcement, like this video of that missile being elevated, them elevating the table on this missile, before the Russians even see that, Zelensky's going to put out a video or a message, an audio message on a PA system in a bombed out city that's going to say, you do realize he's about to nuke you too. Are you sure you want to fight for a guy who's willing to eradicate even you when you are supposed to be fighting for him?
Exactly.
That's going to happen first. And those people are going to be like, nah, I ain't fighting this shit anymore. This is bullshit. Now my enemy's on both sides. Basically, he's going to be like, who do I fight against if I don't even know who I'm fighting for anymore? That's what I'm saying. The misinformation, the morale break, the cold weather, the no food, the constant counteroffensives by the Ukrainians pushing them further and further back into their own country. The common soldier is going to hit the breaking point and just be like, fuck this.
And speaking of which, Sean, there's actually been countless times there's been mutinies actually in Russian army, actually, in their boot camps.
You know that.
Yeah, we did a story last week about a guy who joined the Wagner group and then quit and then started killing Russian police and then somehow got caught by Wagner group. And now he's probably dead. Executed.
No, but like multiple army men, I'm saying. Not just
I know, but I gave you the worst one. The Wagner group is probably the worst one, aside from the Chechens led by Rezvan Kadyrov. Revzon, Salt Life looking motherfucker, that guy. Yeah. Yeah, that guy. Like, I swear to God, every time I see that guy's face, I'm like, that guy drives an F-250 with a Salt Life sticker and a can of Copenhagen in his back pocket. He just has that look, and yet he's one of the most heinous Chechen rebels out there. It's like, looks aren't everything, I guess. The image isn't everything. Anyway, I guess we already know the answer then. If Russia runs out of missiles, and we put Patriot system missiles that are in the country now, Russia just upped the stakes. They just elevated tables on nuclear weapons. They just started showing that they're ready to use them because now we're pushing them, in air quotes, to do it by installing air defense missile systems.
We ain't pushing shit. They're just blowing smoke.
You sure about that?
Well, somebody has to say that, right? Like, I get it. Mike is saying that some people have to think that way because it's optimistic, and that's true.
But
some people like me have to be, I don't want to say pessimistic, I want to say realistic. We did something they said not to do, and this is their response. But truth be told, this is the first time we finally did that. Because remember, everything before was, if you do that, that's an escalation, and we back down. All year we did that.
How many times did we tell them, to not put troops on the border of Ukraine?
Yes, but
How
the
many
thing is
times
we
do we
never
not
did
tell them
shit
not to go
about it.
into Ukraine?
I know, but we
no.
never did anything about it. We just said it and then let him run over us. Every time he said something, we folded like a cheap suit. This is the first time that the United States did something and the Russians said, don't do it, and we were like, fuck you, we did it anyway. This is the
Right.
first time. Good on us, honestly. I think the reason that we're going to start taking these calculated risks and doing these things is because we want this shit over with just like everyone else. We're like, enough.
Well, how many years have we been in a war with Ukraine since 2013?
With us? Never.
No, with the whole conflict, I'm saying.
This conflict, realistically, this conflict with Ukraine, with the Russian Federation, I would argue started in 2007. And then it started to escalate. And then it backed off. And then it escalated again and turned into a land grab. And by then it was 2014. And by then it was, please let us join your boys club in NATO. We want to be part of you. We want to contribute to your cause because we're the breadbasket of the world. We will help feed the hungry that you go and do humanitarian missions for. We will supply you with the grain and the food that you need for that. We're Ukraine. This is what we do. And the NATO was like, okay, but you got to disarm all your nuclear weapons. And they're like, we don't have any. You told us to do that in 2008, and we did. And they're like, yeah, but you have all the Russian ones that they left behind. You're going to have to get rid of those too. And then the Ukrainians are like, listen, we can't do that because that's the one thing that keeps them from invading us. And they were like, yeah, we're NATO. You're going to either do it or we're just not going to hear you out anymore. So Ukraine was like, okay. But we better have assurances that you're going to protect us because as soon as we drop our pants, they're going to fuck us in the ass.
And sure enough, they did.
And sure enough, they did. NATO was like, we're NATO. We're not making any promises. And the Ukrainians were like, fuck it. Let's just take the risk.
It's pretty much
they disarmed what nuclear arms they had left from the Russians, leaving it behind. And within 2 months, Crimea was taken over. And Ukraine looked at NATO and was like, what the fuck? And then NATO was like, do you guys hear anything? Did you guys hear something over? No, never mind. Wait a minute. And then Ukraine was like constantly just banging on the door of NATO going, what the fuck? And, they were just sitting in their little meeting sipping on tea with their little pinkies up going, there's something really noisy out there. Pass the sugar. Well, they did that all the way up until last year. And then it got right in their face again because they couldn't ignore it anymore. Because then the Russians were mounting forces on 3 sides of Ukraine, which involved them occupying 2 other sovereign countries, Belarus and Moldova. Then NATO had no choice but to respond. They looked over at Ukraine and go, ooh, that looks really bad. And Zelensky's like, yeah, fucker, are you going to let us in now or not? Because we're about to get invaded. And what was their response? Nah, here's some helmets. That was their response.
Night mission.
No, the original response was, here's 5,000 helmets. Now, you've heard me say this for months. Ukraine has every right to hate the West because of that. They have tried and tried and tried to get into the boys' club. They have conceded at every turn. And they have been left behind or stabbed in the back. And then systematically raped by their aggressor. Right?
This is not the first time it's happened.
They have taken land. They have taken treasure. They have taken lives. Okay? If I was the Ukrainian common person, I would hate NATO and everything it stood for because they have proven that they are not what they advertise to be. They're liars. They're deceivers, and they're the affluent enjoying their beluga caviar that they bought from the Russians and eating it on shortbread, laughing at the very nations that were trying to get in. They're the kind of asshole that puts their foot on the kid that's drowning and say, "Oh, just shut up and drown already." That's what they're doing. If I was Zelensky and I win this war without a single other nation helping me with actual boots on the ground or an air defense system like the Iron Dome, I would tell NATO to go fuck off. If the Russians actually took over and won, then Ukraine has no reason to ever want to leave Russia again. Because they're like, hey, at least now they're here, and now they will protect us from any Western incursion trying to, quote, help take it back. They'd be like, fuck you. You had years to save us. Now we're them. Now you're the enemy.
You know how I see it?
Yeah.
Ukraine would be the standard student, right? Then there's Russia as the fucking bully. Then there's the, NATO. NATO would be the teacher that's telling Ukraine what the fuck to do, and Ukraine's telling the fucking teacher to fuck off. I'm fine with this bully whether you like it or not.
No. See, the problem is NATO is basically holding Ukraine down while Russia just sits there and ground and pounds them. There's nobody stopping this. See, but that's the thing. The latest thing with the aid packages and the latest thing with the Patriot missile system is another attempt at us to say, no, look, we're helping, see? That's what it is. That's exactly what
bullshit.
that is. If we didn't
bullshit.
send in the missile systems, if we didn't keep writing the checks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then they have no reason to ask us for any help because they'd be like, you're not giving a shit. Why do I care what you think? See, we have a habit of helping just enough to continue to go, what are you talking about? We're helping you here. Look at this. That's what we're doing. Like this, I told you in February. I told you this in January before the invasion even began. When we saw a 40-mile-long convoy in the north, I said, look, this could end with 10 A-10 Warthogs. 10 of them. Fly in and eradicate that column. Voot, gone. Russia's ability to conduct war on that invasion would have ended right there. But we didn't do that, did we? Because, we can't offend anybody. That's escalatory. Remember that word? You can't help them. That's escalatory. You can't send MiG-29s from Poland to Ukraine because that's escalatory. What the hell have Russia been doing for the last 10 months? Escalations.
They've been helping out fucking Assad in Syria.
Wholesale genocide. Well, yeah, but that was way before this.
No, but the point is, they've been doing fucking murders and massacres that we can think of.
Because that's, well, yes, and you can call it all those things, but if you want to keep it simple, it's Russians doing Russian things. That's what it is. Not the average Russian citizen, mind you. Not them, okay? Not those guys that are in St. Petersburg protesting. Not the guys that run Ivan the Bear Tactical. Not the guys at Zenitco. Not those people, no. The military leaders and the president the quote president on paper, the dictator that's running the military leaders. He's got his hand up their ass like puppets. Those people, those are the Russians doing, quote, Russian things. Everyone else, come on, let's be real, okay? There's a guy just like me in fucking Russia right now who can't do this because they're probably being monitored, right? He can't say these things, but I guarantee you if he could, he would, okay? That guy, he likes Starbucks, he likes his Big Mac, he likes his fucking Mercedes, he likes his Adidas tracksuits, okay? He probably likes to buy ARs just as much as we like to buy AKs, okay? He is the...
Pretty much.
He is the yin to this yang that we are, right? That's the average Russian. Not these people that are doing what they're doing in Ukraine. Not those guys. I just want to make that very clear. Like, there are good people in every side of a war. There are. They're just really led by assholes. So anyway, that was a really long segment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if the Russians run out of missiles and drones, they cannot sustain a land campaign because they've already proven they can't do it, not without air support. If we strengthen the air defenses, then they get no air support. Then the Russians keep pushing meat into the grinder senselessly. I don't think they're going to do that. I think elevating their ICBMs and putting them on these launchers, I think that's the statement they were going for. They were like, you know what? Maybe we don't need all these stupid drones anymore. Let's just use one of these. Fuck around and find out. Now, are we going to call their bluff? Or are we going to find a way to take that thing out before it even leaves the pad? Because realistically, that's the solution. It's like, oh, look, they're raising their miss. Oh, what just happened? It just went up like a Roman candle. Oops. That's the American way. That's how we respond. They're gonna elevate that shit, and all of a sudden it's just gonna blow up on the tarmac. What happened? I don't know. Want a beer? That's our response. Anyway, let's move on because that was only
My
the first
answer is
question.
yes. Yes, I did.
That was only the first question for the
All right,
show.
so,
I said we were gonna have a fast show. God damn it. I guess we're
Well,
screwed. I guess let's get through the next one.
When you ask questions like that, you have to factor in that you're going to have commentary.
I think
You're
that
gonna
was a
have a
great
discussion.
segment. I think the chat were busy talking about strippers and pizza, apparently. Anyway,
y'all.
the next question I have is, what if NATO actually stood up to crimes against humanity as an excuse to intervene, right?
talking genocide.
That's part of it, yes. What I was saying is, we think that NATO would respond only in Article 5 violations, or close, almost what happened was an Article 4 one, right? Which doesn't get a military response. But my question is, what if NATO found a way to become more involved without having to lean on Article 5? What if they said, look, we can't wait for an Article 5 situation. These people are being rounded up, tortured, and wholesale murdered, just like what happened 80 years ago. Okay? We have to respond as NATO. We're supposed to be the protectors of the free world and free people. And these free people are under siege and are being eradicated. We have to find a way to get a justification to go in without just an Article 5 thing. What if NATO actually did that? That's the question I'm asking. Okay?
What was the reason we went to Yugoslavia? Was anything similar?
Sort of. Slobodan Milosevic was wholesale slaughtering Bosnians. Because at the time, I think it was Serbians were heavily Orthodox Catholic, something like that, Roman Catholic, Russian Orthodox Catholics.
Yep, and the other ones were
Russian
Muslim.
Orthodox.
And a lot of Bosnians were considered Muslim, my friend Mirza included. So, yeah, there was a lot of that going on. Anyway, so the crimes against humanity angle. We're going to work on this one now, okay? So my first picture for you is this. And I know it's not super detailed, but I'll tell you as I read the story what you're looking at there. This is last Saturday. Russian forces on Saturday struck a maternity hospital for the second time, but now in the city of Kherson, as Moscow continues to heavily shell civilian targets as both sides face off across the Dnieper River. No casualties were reported by Kyrylo Tomoshenko, deputy head of the president's office, who confirmed the attack according to local news outlets. The latest strike on a maternity hospital comes one day after 68 missiles reportedly rained down on Kherson, and just weeks after Russian forces struck another maternity ward in Zaporizhia and killed a 2-day-old infant. Ukrainian police forces on Saturday said that some 47,000 1,000 war crime incidents have been reported since the invasion began over 9 months ago. Head of Ukraine's National Police, Ihor Klimenko, said that the accounts include reports of torture, rape, and the murder of the civilian population. The figure is slightly lower than what Ukraine's Prosecutor General's office reported earlier this month when it said that over 51,000 incidents amounting to war crimes had been committed. Kyiv this week called on the U.S. to back a tribunal that would hold Russia's top leadership accountable for crimes committed in Ukraine, not merely the individual actors. The EU has already backed such a proposal through the U.S. The EU has already backed such a proposal, though the U.S. has officially not followed suit yet. State Department spokesperson was quoted as saying that it was carefully reviewing proposals for a special tribunal and said it looks to remain in lockstep with Kyiv's strongest partners. That's word salad. We're working with all of our international partners as we consider mechanisms to hold Russia to account, the spokesperson says. Our careful review of proposals for a special tribunal includes collaboration with all stakeholders. So it's like a NATO court, I guess, what they're considering. Ukraine has made advances in its eastern regions in recent months, including the recapture of the city of Kherson in November. But Kyiv has warned that it anticipates Moscow's planning something in the south as Ukraine looks to keep Russia on the defensive and oust its troops from the region. On Saturday, the UK Defense Ministry said that Ukraine has liberated roughly 54% of the territory Russia seized following the invasion. Russia is now assessed to have control over just 18% of internationally recognized regions of Ukraine, including the Donbass and Crimea, which Russia has occupied since 2014. They're taking it back, street by street, house by house, hectare by hectare. I don't think they use acres. I think they use hectares.
Sean, I had a crazy thought I'd like to add to this.
Go on.
Since we're talking about accountability as far as what Russia's doing, I don't think we covered this last week since I wasn't here.
Go on.
What concerns me is Putin's motive now, since he's got Viktor Bout now in power. So
I have a story about that. Hold your thought.
Yep, the merchant death.
I'll get there. I promise you, we'll get there. I definitely have that story. Next story for this particular question includes this photo, which actually I felt kind of awe when I saw it. It's kind of cool. Kids in Ukraine have had a very rough year ever since Russia invaded their country in February 2022. Many of Ukraine's children have been uprooted from their homes and separated from their families. I'll have you know, over 6 million Ukrainian children have been displaced because they're in Poland, they're in Moldova, they're in Turkey, they're in Hungary, I think they're in Hungary also. Big thing. We talked about the number of children that were being moved out at the beginning of this show. It's over 6 million now, from what I remember. Anyway, let's see. Most recently, these efforts have appeared... Sorry, I got this wrong, didn't I? Many of Ukraine's children have been uprooted from their homes and separated from their families, and there's been a push by many to help comfort traumatized children. Most recently, these efforts have appeared in the form of doggo therapy. I said doggo, it says dog, but dog therapy. The Center for Social and Psychological Rehabilitation in Boyarka, Ukraine, brought in an 8-year-old dog on December 7th, 2022, to spread joy to the center's kids, the AP reports. Bice, a playful dog with an important job. Yes, that is a bull terrier, from what I read, where I got the picture from. He's a playful dog with an important job. Instantly brought smiles to the children's faces as he walked into the room. The dog's owner, Darina Kokoze, invited each child to step up and ask Bice to do a few tricks. Obedient Bice sat. He stood on his hind legs, he rolled over, gave his paws to the kids for treats. He withstood 30 minutes of hugs and pets from children without ever making a sound, helping to distract the kids from their fears of the war outside. The group of 16 youths ranging in age from 2 to 18 years old have all experienced different levels of war trauma. some witnessing Russian soldiers invading their hometowns and even beating their relatives. Some students have family members on the front lines, or their family members have been killed while in active service. The state-operated community center has been a resource for people coping with trauma since Russia's invasion began in February. Staffers such as psychologist Oksana Sliapova provide regular psychological therapy for those impacted. Even though the center has worked with horses in the past, Sliapova told the AP that this was her first time actually experiencing canine therapy. I've read a lot of literature that working with dogs with four-legged rehabilitators helps children reduce stress. It increases stress resistance and reduces anxiety, she says. Sliapova shared that many of the children are terrified of loud noises ever since the invasion. Even the sound of a window closing or a jet flying overhead may cause a child to drop to the floor and ask for the nearest bomb shelter location. But Bice's presence seemed to melt away all war-stricken anxieties, as the dog offered a moment of freedom for the kids, Kokoze told the AP. In an interview with Fox News, very well-minded editor-in-chief and licensed psychotherapist Amy Morin stressed the benefits that dog therapies can have in terms of releasing stress and anxiety. Now, before I move on, I do want to remind you, I do have a psychology background. So what I'm about to tell you is actually quite true because I did a study on this in college as I went through my degrees. Therapy is a wonderful thing, especially for somebody who's going through something as traumatizing as war, she says. It actually reduces our cortisol levels and gives us a quick little break in some of the anxiety and stress of life that we feel. She said of others under severe stress, once they get a little bit of a break from the extreme stress or the horrible anxiety that they're under, they might be able to see themselves as a hero that emerges from the story rather than a horrible victim. Now, I want to take a little sidebar here, and this may sound dirty or perverted or naughty, but I want to point out something that you saw in Hollywood, TV shows, movies, whatever. You ever notice that in a movie, when there's like a firefight or a really tense situation, suddenly like a male and a female lead in that, like after something horrible just happened, just start going at it like wild animals and then wake up with messy hair and no clothes on? It's kind of the same principle there. It's like you're under a lot of stress, you're wound up tight, you're hurting for a squirtin'. And I know that sounds dirty, but think about what that does to the chemical levels in your brain when something completely not what you just went through is happening to you. Well, these are kids. They can't do that, so they get to play with dogs. But we adults, just saying, you've seen examples of this in Hollywood. Just saying. You can't say you never saw that. Sometimes you watch these war films. Perfect example. Enemy at the Gates. Are you really going to bang Rachel Weisz in a sewer tunnel with rats crawling around? Are you going to make that poor girl pull her pants off and expose her delicate parts to sewage water and rats and fleas? And yes, you are, because both of you just survived a firefight and both of y'all have to have some sort of release. Now you see what I'm getting at. This segment was brought to you by Viagra. I'm kidding. Anyway, the Florida-based Morin said that introducing dogs into therapy is a great idea, especially for children who immediately laugh, smile, and find joy at the animal's presence. The expert explained that it also helps kids who are facing trauma cope with their emotions. Kids work really hard to manage their emotions when they're around a pet, she says, so they know if I'm calm, the dog will be calm, or if I'm excited, the dog will get excited. So often for kids, it's an easy way for them to figure out, okay, how do I regulate my emotions right now? And that's a skill that we want them to have when they're not working with the dogs, too. We want them to take those lessons and move on with them amongst their peers. As long as kids are physically safe, said Morin, this kind of pet therapy absolutely helps in serious circumstances such as war, psychological trauma, and whatnot. Sometimes kids just don't have the words, the language. They don't have the words to describe what they've just been through, she says. So to be able to get a break by playing with a dog or just being a kid for a few minutes is incredibly important to the further development of their mental health. See, that's the thing about kids. No matter how bad psychologically a situation is, kids are very resilient, psychologically speaking. They can take a trauma and forget it ever happened an hour later with the right application of some kind of therapy, whether it be dog, other kids, play, whatever, right? It's just like the kid's psychological state like that is similar to like, do you remember when you guys were teenagers and you went out and partied all night and maybe you smoked a few too many cigarettes and you drank way too much and you threw up everywhere and then you just grabbed another beer and rinsed your mouth out, spit that out and kept drinking and kept partying, and the next day you didn't wake up feeling like a bag of smashed assholes? Yeah, that's kind of the same idea. Like, Pwnery can't party like that anymore. Pwnery can't drink more than 3 Gulden Dracks and not feel like death hours later. I used to be able to put down 7 or 8 of those things in my late 20s. Now that I'm in my mid 40s, not so much anymore. See, with age comes wisdom, because you get wise when you realize, oh, I did a really stupid thing. So the next time, you don't do it that hard. Anyway. The Center for Social and Psychological Rehabilitation is located about 12 miles southwest of Kyiv. It was originally founded in 2000 to provide support after the nuclear explosion at Chernobyl back in 1986. Now, the center also doubles as a shelter that provides stable lighting and heat after Russia's attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. I know that was a really long-winded segment, my apologies. Because it had a lot of psychological talk to it, or psychology talk to it, I really sort of thrived on that one, so thanks for humoring me. Now we're going to go to something a little sick, and it starts with this picture because I couldn't find the actual chamber. This is a room just outside of it. When I tell you what this is, it might piss you off. An alleged torture chamber that housed Ukrainian children has been uncovered in Kherson, according to a top Ukrainian human rights official on Wednesday. Speaking during a presentation on human rights abuses committed against Ukrainian civilians, the Ukrainian Parliament Commissioner for Human Rights, Dmytro Lubinets, said officials uncovered evidence of the chamber through their investigation. The report Wednesday centered around human rights abuses documented against civilian adults and 2 separate reports on abuses against children and soldiers will follow, he says. But in explaining the extent of the abuses uncovered in the investigation, Lubinets said authorities also uncovered the torture of children for the first time. I thought that the bottom could not be broken after Bucha or Irpin. Those were the 2 mass grave sites earlier this year that they found. Torture, rape, people tied with their hands behind their back and a bullet hole in the back of their head. That all sound familiar to you? Yeah. Lupinets told this to reporters referencing areas north of Kyiv that saw the mass killings and reports of torture immediately following Russia's invasion back in February. I personally saw 2 torture chambers in Balaklia, which were located opposite each other. He added in reference to a town in the Kharkiv region, which was retaken by Ukrainian forces back in September. We'll see you later, bearded guy. Thanks for coming in. Don't forget to hit the like button, too, if you guys haven't done so already. Gets more people to see the show. Where did I leave off? Lubinets described a conversation he had with a man who said he had been held in one of the Kharkiv chambers for 90 days as he was tortured with knives, hot objects, and believed he was heading for the firing line multiple times. He heard the screams of women and men who were being tortured 24 hours a day. I thought it was their bottom, he said in a press conference transcribed by Ukrainian outlet Pravda. Nope, we found the bottom in Kherson. In one of the torture chambers, we discovered a separate cell where all the children were kept, he continued. Lupinets said that people who were held in the chamber described a room next to theirs where they knew children had been held, in which Russians referred to as a children's cell. A plastic box was found near this children's cell, full of extracted gold fillings and teeth bridges, now calling the area a mini Auschwitz. The cell was described as damp, and the children were left cold, naked, and hungry. The only difference from the conditions of the children's cell with that of the other prisoners is that they were given 3 tiny, thin, wet mats to lay on, and only 1 glass of water every other day. The children held in the chamber also endured psychological pressure and were told by the guards that their parents had abandoned them. Lubinets described the children as those who resisted Russia's near 7-month-long occupation. One 14-year-old boy was taken into the chamber after he took a picture of Russian equipment that had been reportedly damaged. Lubinets did not detail how long the children were held or if there were any fatalities. I think the box of all the gold teeth might be a little clue that there might be fatalities. The commissioner said authorities have also found 4 torture chambers in the city of Kherson and 6 more in the surrounding regions that Ukrainian forces so far have liberated and retaken. So that's all I've got for this segment. But this is all you needed to know for this segment. If you're NATO and you're at a meeting of your fellow NATO members and you heard this is going on, are you really just going to sit there and go, well, we can't do anything until they invade Poland? Or do you think somebody in that meeting is going, do you know how bad we look by just sitting here doing nothing, knowing that this is going on? Maybe we should find a way to get in there. So I'm going to ask you, my panel, the question. Again, what if NATO found an actual way to intervene with the justification of crimes against humanity? What do you think? Number 1, can it be done? Number 2, would you support it? And then, what do you think they would do? Go ahead. Unless I put all you to sleep.
Nice Rick, you want to go first, buddy?
No, I'm about to go to sleep.
Even I'm getting a little sleepy, but
Yeah.
I can see 2 things going on in this. One, it would be bad for us because, Russia's always going to try to pull
Don't
something.
say us. I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about NATO as a whole.
Well, NATO. I'm talking about NATO in general as us, so apologize for that.
Sure.
But no, is it smart if we go in to stop a massacre and genocide? I don't know, but as far as Russia goes, yeah, they need to be stopped, in my book, from slaughtering millions of people.
Yes, but that's not answering my question. What I'm asking is, what would NATO do or how would NATO be able to justify an incursion without Article 5? Do you think that this is heinous enough for them to have to figure out another way to get in there? Wholesale slaughter of people. We've already seen that throughout the year. Now we have evidence of rape, torture, murder of children. They
I think
have
it's going
a
to take more.
child-specific torture chamber.
I think it's going to actually take more.
What more do they need before the world goes, this is insane, put an end to it now? Like, what else is it going to take?
They're probably not going to do nothing now.
All right, so the consensus, I guess, then would be that NATO is proving to be useless.
It's that, and history's repeated itself. We did this during the Second World War, and yes, NATO wasn't around, but
The Germans killed kids too. We
yep,
know
no,
this.
and we didn't do shit. We took like what 4 years till we actually went in.
The children were usually taken to the camps that the women were taken. And then the
Yep.
children were separated from the women, and they were the ones, I think the children were quickly killed off early. Like, they got them in there and killed them because they couldn't get them to work, so why keep them fed?
And most of those women were also raped.
Of course. But, you know, the soldier would never say that they slept with somebody impure. Whatever. You get my point. And I
Yep.
think my other two panelists are just ambiguous to this. So I'm just going to move on. Next segment, next question. What if Putin actually faced the music at his annual press conference and had to answer the tough questions? Well,
You mean the one he canceled?
exactly. Well, I don't think you're going to get that answer because Russian President Vladimir Putin canceled his annual year-end press conference for the first time in 10 years on Tuesday. Press conferences have been regularly hosted for up to, the press conferences have regularly lasted up to nearly 5 hours in past years, but the widely televised event won't happen this year, with most observers crediting Russia's poor performance in Ukraine in recent weeks. Sentiment against Putin's invasion of Ukraine has also grown steadily within Russia throughout the conflict. Although questions are almost certainly usually vetted in advance, the cancellation is likely due to increasing concerns about the prevalence of anti-war feelings in Russia. This came from the UK Defense Ministry. Kremlin officials are almost certainly extremely sensitive about the possibility that any event attended by Putin could be hijacked by unsanctioned discussion about the special military operation. Putin kicked off his invasion of Ukraine in February and initially made significant progress. Ukrainian forces, bolstered by tens of billions of dollars in funding from the U.S. and its allies, stalled the invasion and successfully took back thousands of square miles of occupied territory this fall. Putin mobilized 300,000 military reservists back in September, a move that triggered a wave of military-age men to flee the country out of fear of a general draft. The infusion of fresh troops does not appear to have had such an impact on the front lines, however. As a result, Putin's strategy has largely shifted away from land grabs. Putin's military has rained down missiles and shells into Ukraine's energy sector and water infrastructure since late fall. Now many Ukrainian citizens are facing the country's bitter winter with unreliable access to power and other necessities. President Biden's administration announced an additional $53 billion in aid to assist the country in fixing its power grid and water infrastructure back in late November. In total, the U.S. has sent nearly $20 billion in military aid to Ukraine since Russia's invasion began. The Biden administration is already struggling to track those funds, as Republicans warn of impending audits once they take control of the House in January. Likely future Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy has said that his party will not be giving a blank check to fend off Russia's invasion. A potential audit would determine how much, if any, of the U.S. aid is ending up in the wrong hands. The Biden administration's previous tracking efforts have inspected only a fraction of aid provided to the country. Now, before anyone gets offended or upset by the number 20 billion in aid to Ukraine, or 53 billion in aid to assist a country that is trying to fight off a genocide of its people, let me remind you that that very Congress of assholes that will be switching power in January are currently arguing about a new omnibus spending bill that would just last long enough to keep the government from shutting down. Right? It's a Band-Aid budget. A couple of months. That bill is $1.7 trillion with a T. That is 1,700 400 billion. So don't bitch about 53 billion to save a world or a country under war. Because
Sean, how many times have you been doing this with Ukraine?
a duct tape and pantyhose thing for 1.7 trillion of the taxpayer dollar that is chocked full of pork fat bills and bullshit and probably snuck in a couple of gun control bills in there. That should be what really pisses you off. Because they're going to do this shit 90 days from now and it'll be another 1.7 trillion. And they'll tell you the same thing. Oh, we have to do it, otherwise the government's going to shut it down or shut down. Shut it the fuck down. We don't care. We don't care. Shut it down. Shut it all down. Lock the doors of Congress, because them stupid fucks don't show up to work half the year anyway. And don't let them keep making the excuse.
Yep.
Once upon a time, a politician would be committing political suicide if he uttered the word billion. Now they say trillion like they say hello. It's not a big deal to them anymore because it ain't their money. They don't care.
That's the thing is the populace thinks they're getting free money because they keep producing it. No, that's coming out of your taxes.
If you want to, you know what? You passed the $1.7 trillion bill. Go right the fuck ahead. Okay? Go ahead. I expect to see, at a minimum, a $10,000 stimulus check in my account in 90 days after you pass that bill. Because if you want to give $10,000 for student loan protection, the only way you're going to sell it to me, a guy who paid his way through college and worked 2 fucking jobs and owned his house at 17 years old because he knew how to save money and bust his ass, a guy like me is only going to accept that if you cut a $10,000 stimulus check with no fucking requirement or strings attached. And you only give it to tax-paying Americans with a social fucking security number. You say, hey, if you got student loan debt, use this 10 grand towards that. If you got $10,000 in credit debt thanks to my fucked up economy policies and inflation, then use it to pay your credit card bills. That is the only way you're going to get me to accept that. And you're not even giving me money. You're giving my money back to me. So don't try to sell that shit either. I'm not stupid. Most of America is not stupid. Just the voter. Because they vote Democrat. They're stupid. Anyway. The question is what if Putin faced the music? The answer is obvious. He won't. That's why he canceled this. Because he knows that they might screen the journalists, but when you put enough of those journalists in the same room together, they'll get brave and they'll start asking the tough questions. And they'll be like, are you fucking stupid? Why did you invade a perfectly sovereign nation? Why did you say they had Nazis when you sent in your known neo-Nazi group into that country? Like, how dumb do you think we are? That's what they would start doing. And then he would have to start writing down names, and all those journalists would start disappearing in the next couple of weeks. Because that's Russians doing Russian things. By the way, this show that is not monetized, that it does not have a Patreon, that I've never asked once for donations for, this show identifies as a student loan. So send me a check. I'm kidding about that. Anyway, I think we answered that question pretty quickly. Thankfully, that was the only story I had for it, because that's the only one we needed to answer the question. So now I'm going to get into the real question. And it's the last 2 stories I've got for the show. So I promise we'll get you out of here before the 2-hour mark. I will do my best. Here's the question I want to ask. What if Ukraine manages to get Paul Whelan released from Russian custody? What if Ukraine negotiates the deal? Not us. Not Joe Biden. What if Ukraine? What if Volodymyr Zelensky? Or what if Vitaly Klitschko manages to get Paul Whelan released from custody? What would the fallout, geopolitically speaking, be? What would the rest of the world think of us if we couldn't even get our own guy out but the Ukrainians could. What would the fallout of that be? What would the benefit to Ukraine be if they could claim a prisoner exchange victory like that? We helped you. We got your guy back. Now will you give us what we've been asking for? Bakshish, right? Let me ask you that question, and here's why I'm asking it. Here's the first picture. You should probably recognize both of them, because they both recently just won Love Connection. No, they didn't. They got traded. The Biden administration's deal to free WNBA star Brittany Griner for arms dealer Victor Bout could help Russia overcome its potential ammunition shortage. This is where Victor Bout comes in, whom the Biden administration unwisely returned back to Putin. This came from Rebecca Koffler. You've already heard me give her credentials. Former DIA intelligence officer, author of Putin's playbook. That woman. Now Koffler fears Bout could help Putin overcome some of his obstacles. His experience as an international arms trafficker is critical now for the Kremlin, because he knows the ins and outs of the clandestine networks and arms dealers that he used to use when he was selling Soviet-era military hardware to terrorists and warlords all across the world. Bout will undoubtedly be helping Putin's war machine chug along. Koffler's comments come after the Biden administration brokered a controversial deal with Russia last week, swapping Griner for Bout, a Russian arms dealer known as the Merchant of Death, a man who is single-handedly responsible for the deaths of tens of thousands of people worldwide, traded for a person made famous by playing a child's game. Think about that.
Well, I did see one very good meme about that.
There's more coming. Trust
Oh,
me,
I
there's more
know.
coming.
I know, but this one's a doozy.
Go on.
With that trade, you witnessed the first ever WNBA trade.
Oh yeah, you told me that this morning. Or no,
No.
Scott told me that this morning.
Scott told you that one
Yeah,
this morning.
that was
probably.
funny.
But that's I've been seeing that meme go around a lot. The first ever WNBA trade.
That
It wasn't
mattered.
even a good trade.
That mattered.
Yeah.
So the exchange could end up paying dividends for Russian President Vladimir Putin's ability to work around sanctions that have limited Moscow's ability to replenish the ammunition its forces are quickly burning through. There's no question Russia is struggling to replenish indigenously, but it's rapidly depleting ammunition stockpile after 10 months of fighting in Ukraine. Putin is likely aware of the high burn rate for ammo and precision-guided munitions, and since he's planning on a protracted war of attrition in Ukraine, as he indicated last week, in November, Russia increased its military budget for 2023 to $84 billion, more than 40% higher than originally planned. On Monday, a U.S. military official told reporters that Russia's available ammunition, the Pentagon classifies as fully serviceable, could be used up early next year, forcing Moscow to turn to more unreliable rockets and artillery shells that are in some cases over 40 years old.
You don't say.
The move to the older and less reliable shells could pose a danger to Russian forces as a result of increased failure rates and could even endanger Ukrainian civilians, who would likely encounter unexploded ordnance across the country. So, this essentially puts Russian forces in a position to have to make a choice about what risks it's willing to accept in terms of increased failure rates, unpredictable performance, and whether or not these degraded conditions of older ammunition will require refurbishment, or in my case, new primers, which are short for the 4th fucking year in a row. Which of course requires a certain amount of expertise and time. You load the ammunition and you cross your fingers and you hope it's going to fire. Or when it lands, it's going to explode, the official added. Or if you're Tony York, that it doesn't blow your gun up because you double charged the powder. Nice little dig, huh? Russian troops have been using ammunition at a staggering rate since the country began its invasion of Ukraine, stressing a Russian defense industry has encountered difficulty replenishing stocks amid international sanctions against the Russian economy. Although Putin transitioned the Russian economy on a wartime footing even prior to invading Ukraine on February 24th, their production capacity is hampered by the sanctions that limit Russia's ability to import foreign components on which it was reliant. Even Russians buy Fiocchi primers. That's a joke. I don't know what they actually use aside from Tula. Koffler said while noting she believes that Russia is still able to manufacture long-range missiles such as the KH-101, a stealthy air-launched cruise missile carrying conventional warheads. Koffler also argued that the ammunition shortage was unlikely to deter Russia from continuing its war in Ukraine. To expect that Putin will stop waging war in Ukraine because of an ammo shortage would be wishful thinking, Koffler says. Russian troops will use old stocks of ordnance, degraded ammo, everything, including the kitchen sink, to fulfill Putin's orders. Why not? They're rolling in with T-54s now, aren't they? Reached for comment, a spokesperson for the White House National Security Council pointed to comments made by National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan during Monday's press conference. Asked to respond to Boot expressing a willingness to join the Russian war effort in Ukraine, Sullivan said, "From our perspective, what we want to do is make sure that we are blunting any Russian effort." Oops, sorry, I skipped a line. Let me repeat that. Let me start that over. Asked to respond to Boot expressing a willingness to join the Russian war effort in Ukraine, Sullivan said that the U.S. would focus on things that actually represent a genuine threat to Ukraine. From our perspective, what we want is to make sure that we're blunting any Russian effort to be able to gain advantage in Ukraine, whether it's military advantage or advantage through brutalizing and destroying civilian infrastructure. So our focus is going to be upon those things that actually represent a genuine threat to Ukraine and the people of Ukraine, not to comments that are made on television shows, and we'll continue to focus on that as we go forward.
Right?
What you're hearing there is the administration is coming together, and they're all doing this. We're not going to answer these questions because you're asking them. We're going to just tell you what we're going to do, and we're telling you that leaving the merchant of death to his own devices isn't important at all. No, what we're telling you is important is important. That's what he's
While
saying.
you're trying to take away our firearms, and on top of, telling us that all those billions of dollars of equipment and machine guns you gave to terrorists was a good idea.
Let me remind you all that anytime you hear anybody, Republican or Democrat, in Congress mention and utter a word about gun control, you remind them of this photo, and you remind them
terrorist machine guns
that before you try to limit the American law-abiding citizen of his constitutional right to keep and bear arms, that you should have thought of that before you released a man responsible for the death of tens of thousands of people worldwide as an international criminal arms dealer. And then remind them to go fuck themselves. Because until they correct this little faux pas, I don't want to hear a word out of them about gun control. They don't have a leg to stand on when it comes to that. My one dog was about to attack my other dog. She just gave Betty mean mug, which I thought was kind of funny.
To make a scary movie reference.
Go on.
American components, all made in Taiwan.
That's true. But I don't think CCIs are made in Taiwan. All right.
All the chips are, and that's what the Russians lack, the ability to make.
I'm going to show you a photo, and this is the inspiration I got for asking the last question of the show about what if Ukraine negotiates the deal. This guy right here. You may not recognize him yet, but when I tell you who he is and what he was, you're going to start asking questions. Ukrainian military and intelligence agencies have freed American prisoner of war and former Air Force veteran Suedi Murakesi. That's his name. During a swap involving dozens of prisoners from each side, Russian forces arrested Murakesi, who's 35, on suspicion of serving as a CIA operative. Sounds familiar. Sounds like,
Hmm.
I don't know, Paul Whelan. Imagine that.
Who knew?
Murakesi had lived for 2 years in the city of Kherson before his arrest in June, following the start of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. A 2-hour ceasefire allowed soldiers from Ukraine and Russia to meet just outside of Zaporizhia in the gray zone and swap prisoners. Murakesi had remained in Russian-controlled territory prior to the exchange. This came from ABC News. Murakesi spoke of his treatment in a Russian torture chamber where he stayed for weeks earlier in the war, subjected to electric shocks in a basement where soldiers accused him of being a CIA operative and participating in pro-Ukrainian protests. He claimed that the soldiers provided minimal food and water. Russian state-owned news agency TASS reported that authorities charged Murakesi with inciting ethnic hatred. He remained in custody along with Alexander Druka and Andy Tai Nok-win, 2 American fighters arrested by Russian forces back in June. The Russians then moved Murakesi to a prison in Donetsk, where he remained for 3 months before they released him. He remained in the city since he did not have his passport and therefore could not leave the Russian-controlled territory. Ukraine secured the release of 64 soldiers and 5 slain Ukrainians in addition to Murakesi, The Hill reports. Ukrainian forces said they were taking Murakesi to Kyiv. His brother told the Guardian newspaper that of all their friends and family had been extremely worried for his well-being since they had heard nothing from him for weeks following his arrest. He insisted at the time that Russia kept his brother as a prisoner for their own propaganda purposes. Murakesi was originally born in Rwanda in 1985, but fled with his family due to genocide. Imagine that. After which they moved to Minnesota. I suspect they moved to Minnesota under the refugee program, similar to my friend Mirza from Bosnia and my friend Steve from Serbia. It's kind of the same thing, right? They are all victims of national wars that involve genocide. Imagine that. He first visited Ukraine in 2017 for business, but settled there permanently in 2020. He had served in the U.S. Air Force prior to living in Ukraine. U.S. State Department had previously said that it was aware of reports of Murakesi's detention, but declined to comment further due to, quote, privacy considerations, but his family said that they had remained in daily contact with the State Department about his situation. Andriy Yermak, head of the Ukrainian presidential office, wrote on Telegram that another exchange of prisoners had happened, adding that we continue to return ours, sometimes even returning yours. That's kind of a jab in the ribs there, if I'm honest. So I'm going to ask that question again, as I did for the last couple of segments. What if Ukraine manages to get back Paul Whelan now? How's that going to make us look? Not you and me. How's that going to make the United States on a geopolitical front? How's that going to make us look?
You probably don't want an answer.
If we can't get our own guys out, but they do it for us. And let me remind you, we could have got them out. We know now that it wasn't take Brittany Griner or nothing. That's bullshit. They said you can have one, but not both. That's what they told him. And we took the basketball player. Not the guy who was a decorated Marine veteran. Not that guy.
Well,
No, not the old white dude. Okay? Not the veteran. No. Who had been there longer than her. Who had gotten sick and was he was under arrest in a hospital getting treatment. Not that guy. No. We're going to take the basketball player because Kamala Harris needs a political and racial victory. That's what that was. That was a stunt. Make no mistake. I'm not saying
If
she didn't deserve
she
to be
still
set
won't go to
free.
the border.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that Brittany Griner didn't deserve to come home. Far from it. Anybody who gets taken against their will, they need to come home. But the
She shouldn't
fact
have gone
is,
over there in the first place.
if we go by the order of detention, she shouldn't have been the first one. That's all I'm saying. It's cool that she's back. Great. It's funny that her wife said that they were going to continue to fight for Paul Whelan's release and has yet to say a word about it since she came home. Just saying. What if Ukraine gets him back for us? What do we have to pay them for it? It's not like Zelensky's going to be like, I got your Marine back. You can have him with our compliments. No, let's not fool ourselves. We know what he wants. He wants an air defense system. He wants, I don't think it's the Iron Dome, but he definitely wants an air defense system.
It needs CRAM.
We gave him Patriot missiles. We gave him that.
CRAM is basically CWIZ on a land vehicle with special ammunition that, like, once it goes beyond a certain point, it self-destructs. 20 millimeter minigun goodness.
A lot of our air-to-air missiles do that. Our air-to-air missiles. Like, they track a target. If they lose guidance, they blow. Right? Now, whatever the Ukrainians had that went into Poland, I don't think did that. But I don't think it was our missile either. But yeah. Like, I mean, we've even seen it. And I know if Fine Ape is still listening, he's going to roll his eyes. But we've even had, like, even the simulators that, like, even the Grim Reapers do. They're like, yeah, these missiles are made to track a target, and if they lose track of target, they blow up so they don't just veer off and hit some, like, you know, target that they weren't even supposed to. They're made to detonate if they lose tracking. It's like a safety feature. We know that. But, okay, the thing you're suggesting, right? What's its effective range? Because, I mean, cruise missiles are, some of them fly quite high. I don't think that's going to work. The ones that come down at treetop level, no doubt about it. I agree with you. But what about the ones that are like the Shahed drones that are, you know, a couple thousand feet in the air and then they just come into like a death approach, like
They
a buzz
can just
bomb?
use rocket launchers and shoot them down.
Maybe.
They do have that option.
Maybe.
Because most Navy ships are equipped with
Man
the
pads.
CRAM.
Okay.
No, CRAM.
Okay.
Which is a short-range guided anti-missile missile.
Okay. Okay.
Looks like a big box, and it shoots out. They look kind of like a 2.75-inch rocket,
Yes.
but they're guided.
Huh. Data link or like
Radar.
okay. So, okay, what do you think that's what we would have to do if they got back Whelan for us? Like, do you think that would
No,
be the solution?
I think they need like 50 to 100 units of CRAM. Because that shit is good for... Yeah, because that shit is what we were using in Afghanistan and shit for anti-drone defense in Iraq.
Okay.
Too.
And
They
you
were-
said
they
it's
were
very
shooting down
mobile,
drones.
right?
They put them on the back of like a 5-ton truck.
So it's portable enough to, I don't know, install them on the rooftops of very tall buildings as well?
You know what CWIZ is?
Yes.
Looks like kind of they dress up the CWIZ to look like one of the Groot's little pals, the little orange guys.
Yes.
They took that and put it on a 5-ton truck and made special ammo for it.
They put minions on a 5-ton
Yeah.
truck.
Yeah, that's what a CRAM is. The
That-
CRAM is nothing but CWIZ on a 5-ton truck with special ammo that self-destructs once it goes a certain distance.
Okay, so you
So-
could technically
So you don't have to
take
worry
this and
about the ammo. Yeah, that
you
reuse
could put
it for
this on
base
a rooftop
defense.
if you wanted to.
Oh hell yeah!
Okay, so it's not just limited to ground. You can actually take one of those.
No, you can put it on. You can mount it a variety of different ways.
I was gonna say you can take one of those badass Mi-8 helicopters, pick it up, and just put it on the roof of a building. And just be like, here you go.
Yeah.
Now you have an advantage of elevation. That's cool.
But
Okay.
the problem with that is you've got a fixed position now.
Yes. Yes.
And as one of my favorite generals has said,
Fixed
fixed
fortifications are
fortifications-
the monuments to the stupidity of mankind.
yes. I'm glad you knew where I was going with that.
Yes, it's a good quote. But I was thinking like for city defenses, I guess, not.
Well, that's exactly what you do. You drive it up onto a damn parking lot,
Sure.
parking garage roof or
Top
something.
floor of a parking garage and then just drive away. Okay, I'm with you there.
Yeah.
I'm with you there.
I still think you should screen share the picture of the new Russian tactical.
No. No. What I'm actually going to do is I'm going to play this because we hit the 2-hour mark. And I think we answered all the
We
questions.
always do.
Yes, and I think we answered all the questions too. So, this was the War Room, day 296, and I'm very grateful for all of you in the audience. John Z especially was a total stud in terms of activity in the chat. If you're new to my channel, welcome, but if you're a regular here, welcome back. Either way, check out my other playlists, see if my other interests are of interest to you. I'm working on a couple of playlists for my penny arcades, one of which you might find quite exciting, actually. So I'm probably going to be doing that this weekend, if I'm not playing World of Warships with these guys. So anyway, like I said before, this was the War Room, day 296. We'll be back next week. Slava Ukraini!
But I am Slava.
And
Shall not be infringed.
And we got it all in there.